Lofi Poli Sci, how we doing out there? Dr. P right here talking our famous question. What's going on in the world today? And connect with people all over the place for all your local lo-fi updates. YouTube's, Instagram, LinkedIn's, all over the interwebs is where we be. Now straight to that lo-fi global press for you. And out in West Africa, in the country of Senegal, we have presidential elections coming next month. But shenanigans persist. Because, of course, no country just has easy-going presidential elections these days. Oh, no, everything's got to be a controversy. But here, people be playing. Check it. The current president can't run again because he's termed out. But his prime minister, who's of his political party, is running to keep them in power. But the two main opposition figures have both been banned from running against this main political party. From the prime minister. That one of the opposition leaders is banned for having been convicted of defamation and can't run for president for 5 years. And he's calling shenanigans on those charges, of course. And the son of a former president was also barred from running for president for having dual citizenship, which he says he renounced before applying to run. So again, shenanigans is the word of the day. And we'll be watching this one play out and see if these candidates can appeal the Electoral Council's decision before the elections next month. Now, out to the Middle East and Central Asia, to Pakistan and Iran, we go. These two countries this past week fired missiles /and/or drones over at each other, across each other's sovereign territory, taking the lives of people in both countries. Iran went first and said it was targeting militants and terrorists by firing into Pakistan. Then Pakistan pulled its ambassador from the country and fired on militants and terrorists in Iran. And then Iran pulled its ambassador. But now, diplomatic ties are being restored, and both ambassadors are said to be going back, as both countries want to work for a mutually beneficial future. But it makes me think, lots of countries these days be firing drones and missiles into other people's countries. And all of them claiming terrorists this, militants this, national security threats, global security threats. It's almost like sovereignty just isn't what it used to be. Or perhaps sovereignty was a loaded word from the beginning. You tell me. Now let's head on over to the eastern coast of South America, south of Brazil. To Uruguay we go. Out in Uruguay, a piece of legislation has been presented and initially passed the Senate that would grant home arrest to people in jail currently that are at age 65 and over, if a judge says that their mental and physical well-being is being hurt by being in prison and it's affecting their human dignity. Now, the catch. Survivors of the 1970s and 80s military junta that murdered and disappeared thousands of people in Uruguay. The survivors say this is going to give a free pass to those murderers, and they shouldn't be allowed to be free. They shouldn't be allowed for home arrest. And this is a tough one, people, and I think it's something that it's not only a struggle in Uruguay, but lots of countries struggle with this. And by that, I mean something we all struggle with. Because let's be real, we are countries. Countries are made of people. And the idea of human dignity, and the idea of human rights, and then the idea of justice, and how sometimes these things may or may not conflict with each other. Eyes on Uruguay, people, because the discussion they are having there can really make us think about who we are right here. Now moving forward, because we never move on from anything, to Japan and the moon we go. And yes, I said Japan and the moon because Japan just landed on the moon, my friends. So awesome, so happy about this. Congratulations, Japan. And Japan becomes only the 5th country to do so. Did you know it? Do you know the other 4 countries? Give you 10 seconds. Name them. Go. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 4, 2, 6, 1. They are, that place south of Canada, north of Mexico, Japan, China, Russia, and India. This is a big deal, people, as India just landed on the moon. Now it's Japan. Who's next? And how long until corporations land there? And then, lunar colonization. Oh, the Artemis Accords, a conversation for another day. And a last piece of something before we switch into our fab-5 of the day. Spotify versus Apple. Because somebody's got to do it. And for a minute ago, the gaming giant Fortnite, they went toe-to-toe with Apple about how it forces apps to do in-app purchase transactions and to go through the Apple Store. And that way Apple could get a cut of that transaction. And Fortnite, the game, they fought against this in the court system. And they won. But now, Apple is saying that, yes, apps can use other means to do in-app purchases outside of the App Store. Sure. But Apple still gets a 27% cut of that transaction. And Spotify is like, oh, WTF, this is exactly the kind of BS that makes everyone hate Apple. And exactly what Apple was taken to court over. And Apple, of course, just does their thing. Capitalism. Everything's allowed, so long as there's no rule against it. So they say. All right, check it, people. I was thinking, what fab-5 for our fast 5 can we do today? I was thinking all the top 10s we did last season, back in season 8, and things like GDP per capita, HDI, CPI, biggest countries, smallest countries, and so much more. So I decided we're going to do my 5 favorite development indicators. Meaning, this is a list of my 5 favorite measures of development for countries around the world. I'll tell you what each of them is and what it measures, and how we calculate it. And then, off to the next one we'll go. Let's dig it. Number 5, GDP per capita. So everyone's always talking GDP this, GDP that, all the money a country makes from selling all the goods and services in that country in one calendar year. It tells you about how rich a country is, right? I think that number is, I'll be polite about saying it, I think it's BS. Because any country with a massive population looks like they're doing good in GDP, it looks like they're rich. But it's only when you divide GDP by the population of a country that you get the average income of a person who lives there. And we call that GDP per capita. It provides a far superior idea of development in a country compared to just GDP. But GDP per capita, it assumes income inequality in a country does not exist. And we all know that just isn't so. Income inequality exists everywhere. So number 4 on the list, Gini. The Gini Index. It measures countries' levels of income inequality each year over time. So this one, in combination with GDP per capita, really gives you a better idea of how development is going, at least economically, in a country. Now, number 3 on our list helps us take a little bit of an idea about understanding how income inequality plays out, maybe where it comes from, but further digs into political development in a country. Because economic development isn't the only thing that matters. Oh, no. Number 3, CPI, the Corruption Perception Index by the organization Transparency International. It measures perceived levels of corruption in a country in 180 countries, from 0 to 100. 0, most corrupt, 100, least corrupt. And it measures perceived corruption. Because you can't really get an honest answer out of someone, excuse me, are you corrupt or not? No, you can't do that. But so far, our 3 that we've gone over so far, GDP, or GDP per capita, Gini, CPI, that gives us political and economic development. But what about human development in a country? Number 2 on our list, HDI, the Human Development Index, made by the United Nations, and it measures countries' life expectancy, the average years of schooling of the population, and the GNI per capita with PPP, which is purchasing power parity, which is somewhat similar to GDP per capita, just know that. but HDI measures a people's health, education, and income, a far superior measure of development when thinking about the well-being of a people as being the actual definition of development. And to that end, our number one, also done by the United Nations, GII, the Gender Inequality Index, which measures health, empowerment, and the labor market in terms of gender inequality. Now, health is measured by maternal mortality ratios and adolescent birth rates. Empowerment is measured as female and male population with at least a secondary education, and female and male shares of parliamentary seats in government. The labor market is measured as female and male labor force participation rates. And these measures are combined to create a female gender index, as well as a male gender index. And then those two are compared to calculate the Gender Inequality Index. And the GII tells us a lot about all the other data we just mentioned. And really, it's when they're all together. That's where it's at. GDP per capita, Gini Index, Corruption Perception Index, the Human Development Index, the Gender Inequality Index. When you have all those measures together for a country over time, that's when you can see the real trends in development. And then you can compare that data to the same data from other countries to really know what's going on in the world today. And there you have it, peeps, my fab-5 development indicators. Now you know. Now switching gears to that lo-fi global trivia, my friends. We got 5 trivia questions coming at you. Let's dig it. Number 1. How many countries are in Africa? I say, how many countries are in Africa? Number 2, how many countries are in the Americas and the Caribbean? How many countries are in the Americas and the Caribbean? Number 3, how many countries are in Asia and the Pacific? How many countries are in Asia and the Pacific? Number 4, how many countries are in Europe? I say, how many countries are in Europe? And number 5, how many countries are in the Middle East? How many countries are in the Middle East? And a special number 6 for you out there. Add those up. What do you get? And is that the number of countries that exist in the world? Why or why not? Write in. Love you, Lo-Fi. And this, just a snap of what's going on in the world today. I bring it down, like. Lofi Poli Sci is more than just me. It's the we that we be. Pickering, signing off.